New study links the Atlantic diet with health benefits. Here's how to eat it. The Atlantic diet is similar to the Mediterranean diet and may tout some of the same disease-reducing nutrition. You've probably heard of the Mediterranean diet. It's not new in the slightest, but is consistently trendy because of the way research continues to link it to general health and longevity. But have you heard of the Atlantic diet? A study published this month in JAMA linked a diet plentiful in fish, dried fruits, vegetables, beans, and minimally processed foods with a lower risk of metabolic syndrome, a term for a variety of common health conditions that raise the risk of chronic disease. Specifically, researchers in 2014 and 2015 recruited families, which included more than 500 individual participants, to compare their rate of developing metabolic syndrome during a 6-month follow-up. A secondary analysis of the study was conducted from 2021 to late 2023. Those who followed the Atlantic diet were less likely to develop metabolic syndrome, 3% of people who didn't have metabolic syndrome in the study, than those who stuck with their usual lifestyle, 7%. The Atlantic diet is similar to the Mediterranean diet in that it's far from new. It's based on the lifestyle of people from northern Portugal and northwestern Spain and the foods that are locally available. It also mirrors the Mediterranean diet and similar approaches to eating in that it prioritizes a few key food groups, without emphasizing restriction. What's metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is a general term given when someone has a few different health markers that raise your risk for developing chronic disease. The markers that make up metabolic syndrome include things like high blood sugar, high blood pressure, unhealthy cholesterol levels, and more. When put together, these individual risk factors compound the risk for developing long-lasting or dangerous health conditions such as diabetes, stroke, or heart disease, another catch-all term for the #1 cause of death in the US. Metabolic syndrome can also be called insulin-resistant syndrome. According to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, about 1 in 3 adults in the US have it. In terms of the specific parts of metabolic syndrome that can be affected by the Atlantic diet, according to the results of the study from this month, participants who followed the diet were less likely to have a high waist circumference and low levels of good cholesterol. Their risk of high blood pressure, fasting insulin, and triglyceride levels, fat in the blood, weren't affected. What foods are in the Atlantic diet? According to the JAMA study, the Atlantic diet centers on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, olive oil, fish and seafood, starch-based products, such as potatoes or rice, dried fruits, notably chestnuts, dairy, milk and cheese, moderate amounts of meat and wine. The Atlantic diet gets its name because the countries and cultures on which it's modeled sit on the Atlantic Ocean in southern Europe, northern Portugal and northwestern Spain, also referred to as Galatia. But as Healthline reports, it places a particular emphasis on local, seasonal foods and family-centered eating, so eating Atlantic style may look a little different from one person to the next. Read more: Mediterranean diet for heart health, foods to eat and how to get started.